Right, we're beyond the 2:30 bewitching hour, so can I welcome you to the meeting? And thanks for the good attendance that we seem to have. But we will start with any apologies that we have received.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from the Cabinet Member Victoria Wilson and Officer Kate Lauder. Okay,
any other apologies? Take that as a no. We'll move on to item 2, which is any declarations of interest. Are there any to note? Take that as a no. The minutes of the last meeting was the 11th of April. Pages 1 to 4 of the pack. Can I take that? Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm pretty sure I was at that meeting. It doesn't show me on the attendance list.
We'll check the register. Anything else on the minutes? No? Okay. We'll get that amended as necessary. Item 4 is the corporate delivery plan for 23-24. And we have a few people here to represent it. Councillor White, are you going to lead off?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got supporting me Alex Thorogood to my right, Wendy Thompson to my left, and also John Tradewell, the Deputy Chief Executive, on my far left. The corporate delivery plan is something that comes out every year, and it really does speak for itself. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't intend to go through it in any detail other than just to highlight some of the key points contained within the report. I'd like to thank officers for their support in getting it to this point. This has been to an informal meeting of the Cabinet to check whether or not those people who are being held to account for those things that are being delivered, that need to be delivered over the forthcoming year, are aware of their responsibilities. I noticed there is a typo within the actual annex. There's a guy here called Alan White who keeps appearing, and I'm sure he was supposed to have delegated that to somebody else, but never mind. It seems like I've got stuck with a few jobs as well. During the course of this forthcoming year, you will have the opportunity as scrutineers to take a look at the progress that we are making against these objectives. And what I'll do now, Mr. Chairman, is just go through the highlights of the report contained in the covering note to the appendices. First up is supporting Staffordshire's economy to grow and generate more and better paid jobs. And we've highlighted 3 particular areas there that we will be emphasising. Climate change remains an important issue for us, as does enhancing our environment and making Staffordshire more sustainable. Good health and well-being, resilience and independence is something we've been working towards throughout my time as a county councillor, and it continues to be a theme throughout this forthcoming year. Fixing more roads, improving transport and digital connections. For those of us who may or may not have been beating the mean streets of Staffordshire on the election campaigns, you will know the importance of fixing more roads. To that end, you'll also be aware that the County Council in the MTFS process, for which this committee in particular was prominent in the interrogation of the sort of sense of that budget, fixing more roads was a key component of what we intended to achieve, including putting an additional £15 million over and above that we are already allocated by government. We should also take note that over the course of many years, the amount that we've been allocated from central government has come down, and that in part plays a role with the amount we can put into the roads. But we have decided to put Staffordshire County Council taxpayers' money over and above that into the roads in order to try and right the situation. Offering every child and young person the best start in life is something that Councillor Sutton has been pushing forwards for many years. Improving resilience, improving parenting and offering support with families at the earliest possible opportunity is something that we are strongly committed to. Having good families means a good start, means that there is less pressure on children's social services system. Living within our means and delivering value for money is something that we can be proud that we've been able to achieve over the past 14 years, and we continue that theme throughout. Working with communities, we know that communities have been instrumental in our response to the COVID crisis, the way that communities, individuals, local groups stepped up to help those who perhaps couldn't help themselves with things like getting prescriptions, making sure that they had adequate food, and so we want to continue that theme, and we hope we don't lose any of the good work that was generated during the pandemic. And then workforce, making sure that those people who work here feel happy and fulfilled and are able to do a good job. And then finally digital, which is always a challenge, digital, because we always have to remind ourselves that some people aren't digitally capable. Not just capable, but struggle to actually get online. So we do need to make sure that we retain the ability for those people that do need to phone Staffordshire County Council, that they are able to do so, albeit in a slightly more limited way than previously. And of course, within the digital aspect and communities, the role of local councillors, making sure that we're reaching out to those people who perhaps will struggle to make contact in other ways. So, Mr. Chairman, that's a very brief trot through the paper. When you go to the annex, you see that we don't hide from our commitment to deliver over the forthcoming year. The appendices are so big, I've had mine done in big format so I can read the blasted thing. So hopefully you can see as well. So as we progress through the year, I hope that the various chairs of the scrutiny committees just pick up on those areas of interest for their committees and make sure that we are working towards achieving those goals. But more importantly, as importantly really, with the scrutiny committees, making sure that you're helping the council come up with the ideas to help deliver some of these things, because that's the overview component, looking forward and helping us to deliver. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my opening statements. I'm happy to take any questions the committee might have about the corporate delivery plan for 23-24.
Pert, are you indicating?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Well, I was going to start by just saying that the how we will measure success, the KPIs and milestones, and I guess because the way it's written, there aren't any KPIs in there, but which I think is somewhat disappointing. I think you're trying to provide a document which tries to highlight what those KPIs are trying to be. I think that's what the document is trying to do, because it's all written in the same bit. But I've got a couple of comments. First of all, it probably would help to number the actions within the action plan. Very minor point, but when we come to refer to them, it becomes a lot easier if they're numbered, because we can then say number 1 or number 2 or whatever it is. Just a minor point. Second one is, I don't think some of these are particularly strategic. You know, there was reference to providing a permit system for the waste site, and I couldn't understand why that was there and what it delivered for anyone apart from a permit system into the waste site. And, you know, it talks about, for example, in one of these, about nursing home capacity. Well, surely it's about nursing home capacity that we are short of. And how are we progressing on that journey? And I can't work out from this document, apart from it feels like a process building block rather than anything that really tells me anything. And I wonder whether some of these are truly meaningful. So, for example, if you read the digital infrastructure one, you know, there's lots of interim steps on the way, but no actual outcome. You know we've got 4% digitally excluded. Why doesn't it say something a bit more meaningful, like we will reduce the level of that 4% by 1% a year so that in 4 years' time there is no digital exclusion? You know, some of these are just, they feel a bit corporate. If I was a man in the street, I'm not sure I would really feel that I could resonate with them. And I think those are probably the sort of the feelings I had from reading it. I found it really hard work, and it didn't really give me any sort of. It gave me lots of building blocks, but nothing tangible to go with it. And I guess that's probably because in part it's trying to set out a framework, but yeah.
Speakers, I'll take another one and then I'll let Councillor White respond. Councillor Worthington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I can understand where Alan's coming from, but I think, as you well know, it was on the election trail. It was all about potholes, I'm afraid, and obviously the A520 runs from Stoke-on-Trent right through into Leek, and I had a price off James Bailey that he needs £1 million to put right the mess I'm in at in Cheddleton. And I'm hoping perhaps that 15 million, if one could just go towards Cheddleton, I'd be very much appreciated, as I've got county council elections in 18 months' time. That's all I've got to say, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, do you want to respond to that couple of comments?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm slightly bamboozled by Councillor Pert's comments. When he said, quote, it feels a bit corporate. It is the corporate delivery plan. So if it feels a bit corporate, it's a little unsurprising. The second point is that when it comes to KPIs, if I look at, say, the first page, the place marketing page, the KPIs are quite specific. Partner, place, board, sentiment, or satisfaction survey scores target 90% or above. Percentage of place, board, marketing activity contributing to key strategic plans, decision making, 80% or above. This is a plan for this year, what we're going to do this year in order to achieve our strategic plan, our 4-year plan. So what we have to do is we take the strategic plan, which we all approved a couple of years ago, and then what we do is we break it down into 4-year bite-sized chunks, and then within that, which is what the corporate delivery plan is, and then within that, we then go for targets and KPIs. Now, some of them are what you might describe, well, are a little vague. For example, May 2023 Eastgate procurement launch, that's a specific date for a specific activity. December 23 appointment of a development partner, specific date, specific activity. When it comes to enterprise centres, occupation in all 8 existing enterprise centres, target 85% or above. And we can go on. So I'm slightly sort of, in the one hand, Councillor Pert, you say, well, it feels a bit corporate and not, which would allude to it being, I suppose, strategic. And then the same, you're saying it's not specific enough. And I'm trying to highlight the fact that it is being specific because it's a 12-month corporate delivery plan. It's May now, and we've got 11 months left to run. And I think what this tries to do is go at that. As far as the highways is concerned, there is, I think every county councillor Councillor Worthington would like the entire 15 million quid spent in their division. Sadly, it's not possible. Oh, right, okay, just yours. So what we are doing is we've got the transformation programme for highways. We've gone into some detail, considerable detail, as to what that looks like and how that will deliver for us. And there have been some key moves around bringing inspectors in-house so that Amy doesn't mark its own homework. Really driving down on specific highways works within members' divisions, making sure that they are done in an affordable and reasonable way. Because we can all think of cases, and I know that I was dealing for one with Councillor Heath, where the amount that was having to be spent on the preamble and the plans and the feasibility studies left you a busted flush. So I get all that, and we are working to rectify that. So I do think that the plan, the corporate delivery plan for 23-24 is reasonably specific. There are individuals who you can hold to account for that. There's no hiding away from the names, except I noticed that Clive Thompson went and retired last week, so he probably decided the corporate delivery plan was too hard for him, and he's gone on cruises or whatever he's doing in his retirement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, another couple of speakers lined up. Councillor Francis.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, where do you start with this? I mean, I've been in local politics now for 24 years. I've been on this council for 14 years, as is Alan, as is Mike here, and a couple of others. And I've been on the MTFS for 12 years, and going through corporate plans for 12 years. Aspirations, good. And it is pretty specific in some areas, the plan is. I remember something that Philip Atkins stood up in full council and said a few years ago now, when we had a problem with highways, and we poured shed a load of money into highways about 5 or 6 years ago. And what he said was, do you want potholes filled, or do you want to look after our vulnerable adults and children? And the upshot of it is that 70 pence in every pound goes on looking after adults, vulnerable adults and vulnerable children. And you can't argue with that. If it was one of my parents that is elderly and needs to be looked after, and I wasn't here to do it, then I would expect a local authority to pick up the mantle, and that's exactly what we do. So we've got some serious issues there and serious things to think about. Having said all that, and it does irritate me, and I would think it irritates everybody in this room, the amount of tax we pay on fuel and car tax and everything else that goes with pumping the government up, that should go back into highway and infrastructure, 90 pence in the pound doesn't. And that's a serious issue. 90 pence in the pound that the average motorist pays in tax does not go on the infrastructure it should go on. That's another issue and something that we should be lobbying about, although we've been doing it for years. And unfortunately, we paid the price for it. We paid the price in the last election for what's going on. So, aspirationally, it's good. There's some specifics I disagree with, and I won't go into them here. And on being on corporate for a number of years, we regurgitate a lot of stuff. We've always regurgitated stuff because we can't do everything in the same time and the shorter period of time that we're allotted, i.e. 4 years, if you like. So we regurgitate stuff. But we do need to concentrate on the things we can fix. And if we can't fix it, if we ain't got enough money to fix it, let's tell the bloody truth and tell them that we ain't got the money to fix it, and then forget about it and fix the things we can fix.
Take Councillor Yates next and then allow you to come back.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Couple of things, just looking at this, very aware that it is a strategic plan, so I don't really want to go into too much detail because you've got other ways of addressing that. But there's reference made to produce a climate change fund in this year and operate the climate change fund. Simple question, is that the councillor fund where we get monies which we can spend in our local divisions? Because I have been inquiring and it's been drawing a bit of a blank. And when it comes to climate change, I'm a little bit disappointed unless it's hidden somewhere, and I've just been looking up the latest action plans. There's no real reference to renewables. And I do believe that, you know, we've got a number of sites, whether it be on buildings or whether it be actually on landfill sites, especially old landfill sites come to mind, where we could be looking at strategic partnerships to actually put renewables on there, principally solar panels and things like that. And I think that is a relatively quick win, and certainly what's happened with the fuel costs in the last 12 months or so should really be focusing the mind on, you know, how much can we produce as own and resilience and whatever. So that's not there. I also think when it comes to carbon sequestration, which is about as close as I'll ever pronounce it, we could be looking at, again, our sort of land stock. And within that, I always consider the unproductive land within the tenanted farms which we've got. I'm not talking about land which is farmable, but certainly in our neck of the woods, and I'm looking at Mike, there's an awful lot of steep stream beds and gullies which you wouldn't put a gazelle on. So why don't we identify that and actually take advantage and encourage our tenants to put trees on that? And I think that, again, is a quick win. Sticking on page 14 and looking at the waste and recycling, I'd like to see, I was up to our local recycling centre full of white vans. Now those white vans may be domestic in inverted commas. Why don't we automatically charge those white vans to raise revenue and not put little charges on domestic people for chucking away an old sink, you know, which happens. So there's a bit of cleverness there. And strategically, I think that would be quite a clever thing to do, to be perfectly honest. You know, and I don't think anybody would push back on something like that. Or even run a permit scheme for residents so that people, you know, people who nip across the border from Cheshire East where they haven't got any recycling centres, they're the ones who should pay a fee for using our services, not our residents, so to speak. Again, a strategic decision which is required there, and I don't think there'll be any pushback on that. The other thing, going on to highways very briefly, simple question is, how exclusive is the AMI contract? Because my concern is, with all this extra money being ploughed in, one of the things which comes up to me is that the money's in, the money's approved, the work hasn't happened, there's no view on the horizon that there's great big yellow trucks coming over the horizon. I've specifically got, you know, the A527, never mind the A520 in mind with Meadows Way, where it's, you said this was going to happen, you've produced this paperwork, nothing's happening, when's it happening? And I'm not getting any answers. Have AMI got the capacity for this sudden uplift of funding? Or is there scope for using other regional contractors to fill the gap? Or is there scope for using local contractors who can do certain jobs? And I think, again, you'd be pushing at an open door with it when it comes to the communities on the support for that. And that's not not wanting to tread on the overall contract and the overall knowing that you need a big national company who's got the investment and who's got the innovation, but it does actually allow to fill that shortage in capacity, which appears to be the case at this moment in time. Again, that would be a good strategic decision to go with the extra strategic funds which are being put in to resolve that problem. And then finally, on page 27, you talk about recruitment. One of the things which is very apparent in the whole of local government at all levels is retaining people and bringing people in with the appropriate skills. We've got a university which has got a campuses spread without Staffordshire. Is the scope, again, strategic level, developing a series of courses, whether they be degree courses or modern apprentices with the higher qualifications, the MVQ levels 5 and above, to actually develop courses where they could have the on-the-job training done in Staffordshire County Council. So effectively, you're almost feeding and bringing in the next generation of staff who are aware what goes on, aware with proper training and local government, and are more likely to want to work to the organisation who actually supports them in the first place. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, quite a bit there. Climate change, highways and recruitment.
There's a lot of questions in that one. First up, can I just say that I agree with everything you'd said there, Councillor Francis. You made some good points, and we do need to bear a lot of what you said in mind. And indeed, you're quite right to highlight the amount of money we have to spend on those statutory obligations to care for people who can't look after themselves. And it's right that we do that.
Well, we should tell people that, aren't we?
Yeah, and well, just coming on to that one, John. And we need to make sure we're communicating it effectively. So, Councillor Yates, the renewables and solar panels, steep slopes, stream beds and gullies that you wouldn't put a gazelle over. I used to have to climb up those when I was in the parachute regiment because there's a training area up there in the moorlands, which I've spent a lot of time on in my life. I can confirm they are very steep, those gullies. I don't know the feasibility of changing that sort of landscape to a treed landscape at all. I should think the reason why I can tell you from hard-won experience, it's mostly heather and gorse. And I'm not sure whether or not trees would take in that area because it is very high up and very miserable, lovely. And depends what you're doing there, whether you're a tourist or whether you're a soldier. The county farms situation is one where we have a specific and limited amount of land in this county. And we have to be very careful when we think about reuse of land and how we allocate it in the future. You can put solar panels onto farmland and sheep can go around them, but actually is it as productive? I don't know. And therefore I wouldn't commit to do anything like that until I've been educated properly myself. But I do think that you're right to talk about the renewables components. I think there's something there that we should spend a bit more time thinking about, and perhaps through Prosperous Committee, or it might be this committee, perhaps think about how what other alternatives there are available to it. But I wouldn't be inclined to sort of say, let's turn over county farms to solar panels, because I don't think that's the way forward. But I think there are other things that we could consider. As far as the household waste recycling centres are concerned, we are consulting, or have consulted, looking at John, on a permit scheme. And it's going to Cabinet next on Wednesday. Yeah. It's been through your committee, I think, hasn't it, Councillor Clements? So we're already there with that. As far as social work in the universities are concerned, certainly Staffordshire University does run social work undergraduate courses. We do get quite a few graduates from Staffordshire University, I'm delighted to say, come from there straight to here for their first job. And I was visiting Lichfield Children's Services a couple of months ago and encountered a couple of young people who just started. They were graduates from Staffordshire University, and they only had a couple of cases on the go at the moment because they're new, they're doing their apprenticeship, and then they'll move into fully fledged social workers. We do get, we have got quite a stable workforce. We get about from my experience, about 30 new people per month on a workforce of just over 4,000. So it's not a huge turnover. And we do get, that's the other thing that always surprises me on the induction meetings, because I present myself to, as you know, because you did an induction course, where I presented myself to you to welcome you to the County Council, and thank you for choosing Staffordshire County Council to come and work. I think you chose Staffordshire County Council. But we do get quite a few returners. They go out, they see the light, they come back. Isn't that wonderful? And I think that tells you a lot about the sort of place that we work, that works here. You're quite correct to talk about, or to have some reservations about whether or not the Amy can spend the additional money. And that was one of the reasons why I just didn't want to tip tons and tons of money into the Amy contract, because we are absolutely committed to making sure that every single pound that is spent in this authority is spent wisely. If you chuck a load of money at somebody, somebody who's struggling to get, gather cash to buy a car, if you suddenly give them another £100,000, they're not going to buy the dead cheap car and then keep the additional money. They're going to go and buy themselves a Rolls Royce or something. So what we want to do is make sure that the money that we do put into Amy is wisely spent, and that's part of what we're trying to achieve at this point. You asked about local contractors. I visited the Lederidge depot near Leek probably 6 months ago to see what goes on there and see the operations actually happening, speak to the highways inspectors. And I was informed at that visit that local contractors are indeed used for certain jobs when they come up. I don't know how thorough or consistent that is around the county. I can only speak to the visit at Lederidge, but I will do some investigations and find out and make sure we are using as many local contractors as possible. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, do you want to come back? Yeah.
Yes, if you don't mind. So just talking about Ladridge, I know they use local contractors when it comes to gritting services, some of the emergencies in the winter. I'm not quite aware that they do actually for road repair maintenance, and there's quite a lot of noise about the fact that there are quite a few accredited for highways local contractors in our area, and it is that capacity planning which concerns me. I wasn't advocating putting solar panels all over tenanted farms. I'm very aware that's a farm on my left-hand side who'd have a panic at the thought of that. Yes, exactly. But I am aware that there's old landfill sites which are pretty much useless for anything else and would be perfect for putting solar panels on, and they are in the ownership of Staffordshire County Council, for example. And if I'm aware of that, then that's the tip of the iceberg of what potentially is available. So I think we have got scope to do things on that. With regards to the recruitment, I wasn't just thinking of the social care service, I was thinking of bringing people into this level of local government as well, so to speak, and having courses associated with that, which I've always been heavily involved in training. That's very important. Succession planning is key to me, so yeah, okay.
Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I was just going to ask really the same question as what Councillor Yates has just spoken about, was highways. Sorry. I'm a bit croaky today. My concern is that we've put all this money in and it's brilliant. I'm not arguing about that. But my concern is that we don't have enough staff to carry those jobs out. The same as what Councillor Yates has just said, as in bringing local contractors in. I know our area doesn't. The staff in the offices as well, I think they need some support. I just think that to be able to achieve all this, we do need the staff there to achieve it, because otherwise we're just going to get bunged down with there's not enough people to fill those potholes.
Bring my other vice chairman who wants to speak on highways as well.
Yeah, just to say that a few years ago we got a very good local contractor of our part of the world who does a lot of tarmac drives, tarmac roads, excellent work, and he does a lot of work for the county council in the winter, snow reading, gritting, things like that, and school plan. And I did take James Bailey out to meet him, possibly 6 years ago after one election. He was very keen to get some work doing potholes and things. Took James up to his farm where he lives and operates from. He was very pleased with the work and, his sort of history of work. And this gentleman was keen to do a deal. But when it came to the paperwork, he got to go limited, he got to do this, he got to do that. It scared him off by the paperwork and the obstacles, shall we say, because he would have been, he does a lot of work around farms, drives, yards. He would have made a super job. He'd have done the potholes. He's on the job. lives in the middle of the moorlands. He's on the site, he hasn't got to travel from heaven knows where, 20 minutes, half an hour to get up there. Well, Newcastle's a short journey. Well, yes. So maybe it's something we could look at. How many hoops have they got to jump through? Because I was going to approach him again to see, because we're so short of contractors at the moment, but he was so disappointed before. I haven't done, but I can make another offer. But would there be any mileage? And I'm not saying he's going to have it without contracts and without restrictions and rules, but it was a bit over the top before, especially when he works for them in the winter.
Councillor White?
So back to Councillor Yates. You're right to highlight the disused quarries point and what we do with those. We have started looking at that, and I'm hopeful that we'll have some plans in place later on this year, or some reasonable feasibility options in place next year for what we can do for those disused quarries. Because, first of all, they're an asset which could be dedicated towards renewables. It could be dedicated towards leisure. And what we do need to do is make sure that, having had the pain of the quarries and the lorries that are associated with it, that when the quarries are remediated, they're put back in the way that we as council and councillors would like to see. So you're right to, I'm agreeing that that's a useful approach, and that it's something we have already started, actually, particularly in the south of the county, where there's lots of minerals extraction goes on in the southeast of the county, which leaves scars on the land which can otherwise be put to good use. To the point from the vice chairs, really, both simultaneously making pretty similar points, if I may be so bold. Yeah, you're right. You do not want to be putting £15 million of additional money over and above into a contract where you think, is it going to be spent? Do they even have the capacity to spend it? So what are the alternatives to making sure that it does get spent in a way that the residents notice? And subcontractors could be one route. So I will do some inquiries of the portfolio holder and James Bailey, and yeah, okay, and I'll get to the bottom of that, because we do want that improvement to take place. It is a source of concern for many people. Some people have expressed their opinions particularly forcefully on the matter, and so I know exactly where I stand on that. Okay.
There's a couple of councillors who want to come back. Councillor Purton and Councillor Francis, I haven't forgotten. But can I make some comments that I want to make? Some of the sections we've not covered, the economy, for instance, page 11 of the report, page 13 on the PDF, there's reference to place marketing, and there's reference to levelling up monies. And my comment is really in terms of improving on the wording of the corporate plan. I would like to see something that says there's some coordination going on in terms of identifying what the priorities are. When you bear in mind that, as far as I'm aware, for levelling up monies, there's been money into Tamworth and Cannock from recollection, what I've seen, and League. So have we got coordination with the districts and boroughs? Do we make sure that we get the right priorities on those things? Again, on the wording of how it's phrased, the climate change section, which is page 14 of the report or page 16 on the PDF, there's a reference to 12,000 volunteers. It doesn't tell us over what period they're going to be obtained. It's unlikely that we're trying to get 12,000 in the 1 year. Are we trying to improve the figure from what it is now currently to get to 12,000? Are we looking to get 12,000 over a certain period? So maybe that needs to be tidied up. Similarly with the 60 energy audits, which is on the same section, where's the time frame on that? So they're just tidy up things. I think the document needs to have that greater detail. And then I'm afraid I have to mention highways, because it's 99% of my postbag, which I often quote. And I had my fair share of it during the election process. There's a lot of dates in the section. It starts on page 17 of the report or page 19 of the PDF. And I looked at these dates and what's happening. There's a future model, which is down as October 23. There is new vision for highways by March 24. And October 24, there'll be new ways of working. So I take it that that's at least 18 months before we get the new ways of working. And the comments that Councillor Heath, the three people to my right, from Councillor Yates onwards, Thompson and Heath, have all said, how does that stack up with the money that we're giving to Amy today and tomorrow? So we're talking about an 18-month expectation of delivery of our new ways of working. Are we pouring money in without having that new structure in place?
I'll pick the new ways of working thing up outside this meeting. I'll have to chase that one down. The Levelling Up Fund bid coordination, the County Council sits on the boards, the Levelling Up Fund boards, so I know that Philip White goes to many of those meetings to make sure that the delivery of that is helping the districts and boroughs to make sure that they work towards the delivery of that. The key concern with the Levelling Up Fund money, of course, is it's very short term. You've got almost no time at all to, if you submit your bid, you've got almost no time to get mobilisation. It's a struggle to get contractors and various consultants to make these things happen. So where the County Council can help, it is trying to help to make those Levelling Up Fund bids work. The 12,000 volunteers, I'll check that. That doesn't feel right to me. That's 1,000 a month. So I think that doesn't ring true to me. So it might be an accumulated number of volunteers. And the 60 energy audits, I think that does ring true, but I'll check that as well for you.
We'll go back on the councillors that want to speak again. Councillor Pertnow, Councillor Francis.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going back to the climate change action plan, and I agree with Nigel on what he said about solar panels and stuff, and I think it should have been a government policy a long time ago for householders to be subsidised to put solar panels on the roof. It would have gone a long way to sorting a lot of the problems out. Having said that, having worked in the power generation industry for quite a number of years, down the road at English Electric, building big generator plant for power stations, the simple reason that we can have wind power and solar power to solve our energy problems is an anathema and a nonsense, to be quite frank, because it can't. That's why we've got to build big nuclear stations. That's why Rolls-Royce submarine nuclear engines can power a town this size with just digging a hole in the ground and burying the damn thing, because it'd last for 25 years. There's a lot of things we can do on this. One of the things that I get upset about Staffordshire, and it's gone on for a long time, whether it's district or county council in particular, there's lots of rivers running through this county, and we've forgotten the art of harnessing water power to generate electricity. We used to have what was called a load of mills from Cheddleton all the way down the Trent Valley down to Lichfield. And in those, there used to be water mills all the way down that valley, hundreds of them, to be quite frank, which used to grind the flour, obviously. And Henry Podmore, an employer of mine years ago, purchased those mills for peanuts to grind ceramics for the ceramic industry and the potteries. Having said that, they demolished all the mills. But I had to take out the DC system from his house in White Oaks, in the Moorlands, where he used to run the whole estate off a DC system powered by 2 turbines in the Churnick Valley. We've lost all that. We need the innovation to go back into that, and if Staffordshire County Council can provide the innovation to do stuff like that with landowners, then we ought to do it. In fact, they want to build a big solar farm on prime agricultural land in my division, and I'm against it, because we need to grow foodstuffs, not just put solar panels on. And Nigel's quite right. If you put them in old quarries or landfill dumps, that's the way to go about it.
Councillor White.
Thanks. I'm not sure about putting paddles in rivers anymore, but your general point, which is about innovating to come up with new ideas, is a well-made point. So, for example, there are villages across Staffordshire who are looking at things like ground source heat pumps, district heating. I think there's a sort of there's an innovation piece where things do evolve, John, and so ground source heat. What we could do is put John in front of a big wind turbine, ask him to talk about a subject, and it would keep it turning for ages. Also heat exchangers. So, for example, extracting the warmth from canals and riverbeds using that. Although you do have to be slightly careful because you can take a little bit too much heat out of the canals in particular, and they turn into this giant block of ice that you can stick in your giant gin and tonic when you get home. So there is innovation available, and some may agree with some of the innovation, some might not, and then we go from there.
Yes.
Yes, sorry to come back, but picking up on what Councillor Francis said, you didn't answer the question actually about are the councillors going to get access to a climate change community fund? Because, before you point at me, because there is a redundant turbine at Biddulph Grange Visitor Centre, which is only redundant because the old analogue technology doesn't work and it needs a new inverter. And with a new inverter, that would provide at least 25 to 35% of the energy. And at the moment, we're spending £1,200 a month. So you've got a massive saving, massive payback. It just needs that little bit of seed funding to get going, which is the principal reason why I wanted to know if we've got access to that fund.
Forgive me, Chairman, I missed the answer to that. The answer is yes. We will have a fund again. I've got another innovation, of course. What we could do is get John Francis in a hamster wheel, connect it to a generator, get him running round.
Okay, are any other comments on the corporate delivery plan? No, I think we've given it a good airing. Hopefully there's some improvements can be made in terms of some of the things that have been suggested there. And thank you for your contribution. We move on to item 5, which is the Children and Families update. This starts on page 31 of the report, or 33 on the PDF. And for this one, we've got Councillor Mark Sutton in attendance. And Nisha Gupta, who's been involved with the report. Did you want to lead off, Councillor Sutton?
So, good afternoon, everyone. As the chairman has just mentioned, I have ID for social care, Nisha Gupta, with us this afternoon to help detail what has been going on in this area. So, start off with a little bit of a summary. So, this is a progress made within children's and families following the cabinet investment that was made towards the end of last year for this financial year. A total of 5.7 million had been agreed for children and families with a view to improving our staffing and workloads within the whole of the directorate, as it was understood that improvements in recruitment and retention and making sure that workloads were manageable was required. And that was changes both in the service that I'm responsible for in my portfolio and also within the area of SEND, my colleague Jonathan Price is responsible for. And this recruitment is primarily been focused on improving recruitment retention and the progression of social workers, residential staff, SEND key workers, educational psychologists, independent reviewing officers, exploitation workers, fostering Mockingbird project and improvements in our placement services. So it's been divided into a number of those areas for the existing positions that we have and how recruitment to existing positions began and how that's developed. For the new positions that we decided that we would have around deputy district leads and social work practice leads and senior send key workers, and then also how we would use this money to help to retain the staff that we already had, particularly in relation to social workers and residential staff. And then the report goes on to talk about measuring the impact. So if I could ask Nisha, we'll give some details of exactly how that money has been invested and where we are with those recruitment levels going forward. That would put sort of the meat on the bones of exactly where we are.
Okay, over to you, Nisha.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark. In terms of recruitment to the existing positions, those are positions that already existed within the service structure, which was like our independent reviewing officers who basically looked after children subject to child protection plans or children who are looked after by the local authority. So we needed more of those because, it was in the business case, just highlighting the need once again, was our numbers of children in care has increased substantially and we needed enough IROs to oversee the progression of those plans. So in terms of recruitment to those posts, I am really pleased to report that majority of those positions have been filled. We are waiting to finally recruit one more IRO lead who will be the team manager managing a staff group of 7 IROs. So we are waiting for that position to be filled. Other than that, all of them have been recruited to. Exploitation staff, again, all the positions have been recruited to, although we are waiting for people to come into post because they have to serve notices where they are and move into their job roles here. We are hoping that by the end of Q1, beginning of Q2, majority of people who have already been recruited and offered should be in posts. What was quite pleasing to see is we work quite closely with our HR colleagues to improve our recruitment strategy. So we have been seeing an increased interest in the positions that have been advertised within children's. So that was quite positive, and we have recruited to quite high caliber of staffing. We have been. Immediately after transformation, that was a challenge for children's services, but it looks like that we have moved on quite a bit from where we were then to where we are now. In terms of creating new positions, so these were the deputy district leads, which were grade 13 roles, and in order to embed the social work progression, we agreed to create a grade 11 social work practice lead role, which was, the focus of that role was to assist in retention, but also practice improvement to improve the quality of intervention with children and family and keeping families together in community. So those new positions, as soon as we had the approval in full council in February, we started working on those job description. We have our staff forums within which we consulted what those job roles should look like, where those should be positioned, how are they going to be structured, and all those job roles have gone through the process of JE and have come out at the grades that we expected. As we speak, all the positions for deputy district leads have been offered. There were 4 posts that were created. They have been offered, but as I said earlier, we are waiting for people to come into posts. In terms of social work practice lead, again, because it's a grade 11 post, we have to map out how many posts we will be creating in terms of grade 9, grade 10, and grade 11 to support the whole service in its entirety. And because of our launch of our Children in Care program, when we started to analyze, we reported earlier in a different scrutiny meeting about the cohort analysis. So we have looked at all the 1,380 children who are in our care, each and every one of them, and what is needed to progress their plans of permanence within community where it is safe to do so, with their families, or through plans of SGO or alternative orders. And those who remain in our care, how can we do our best to support their plan towards independence, to help them progress as an independent adult within communities, rather than relying on resources even after 18, institutionalized support even after 18. So based on that analysis, we are trying to see how we can divide the cohort of staff that we have to support our children who are in our care, as well as make sure that our services to prevent children from coming into care can be logically supported and well supported at an earlier level. In terms of retention, so I've spoken about the social work recruitment and retention. There was another section which was residential staff, because we went through some particular challenges in 2022-23 last financial year around our residential offer. We've seen some changes within the service, and now that we have our sufficiency strategy formalized, we have invested some time in looking at a full review of our residential services. So we are looking to make the service more future-proof. We are looking at the cohort of children that we think will come and remain in our care now and in the coming months and years, and reorganize our service and our offer to meet the sufficiency needs of the future in line with our strategy. That's why we are holding on to the recruitment and retention of our residential staff at this point in time. As soon as that residential review is formalized, we will start to advertise for those new posts and new roles to support our residential offer within Staffordshire. In terms of measuring impact, I've divided that into qualitative and quantitative. So in terms of qualitative impact on our staff, on our people, following the cabinet investment, the impact has been immense. And as an AD and as a management senior leadership group, we always triangulate that information. How do we know that what is the impact that is being felt by our staff through various sources? So it is through not just our in-house staff survey, but also through our LGA survey, through the survey which we do via Think Well, through our contact, which as SLT and as cabinet leads, whoever visits our office sites, what is the messages they are picking up? So we triangulate all the information, and we can confidently say that it has had a very positive impact on the morale of our staff across the service, across Children and Families Directorate. In terms of qualitative impact on service provision, again, we can say that the quality of our service delivery, it was always good, but it is consistent. We are maintaining those services, and as we are reviewing plans, our plans which are focused towards keeping children together, keeping families together with their families within communities, it has got an improved rigor. So we are learning from local authorities like Essex, like Wolverhampton, who have achieved good outcomes for their children in care, and we are trying to bring that learning into how we provide those services for our children in Staffordshire. So there has been a positive impact, and we are likely, as more people come into posts and service stabilizes even further, workloads reduce even further, we are likely to see a much better response in terms of service delivery for our children and families. And in terms of qualitative impact, again, as the report says, we do have fewer children in our care from when our children in care program started to where we are now. So, and another positive impact has been that on the finances of, on the budgets of our children in care, because majority of the budgetary impact is because of children coming and remaining in our residential settings. What we have seen is an improvement, because where we planned the numbers to be for our children in care within residential settings, we have maintained those numbers as a result of our planning. And our timeliness of children being visited, in terms of reviews being conducted, we are maintaining those high standards across the board. So those are a few indicators of where we think this investment has had a positive impact within children's services. Any questions?
Okay. If you could turn the microphone off for now. First one to indicate was Councillor Pert.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I think it's a really critical area, and it shines a bit more of a light on this area and provides some detail and some structure around the thinking. So I think that's really helpful from my perspective, and clearly there is progress being made, and I have to say I was very concerned up until seeing this report and the meeting a couple of months ago now, that actually was just a bottomless pit, and A was a bottomless pit, and B, the numbers weren't going in any of the right directions. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's been really helpful. And I have to say I'm really pleased to see the looked after children number beginning to go down, because I think that it has got to be the acid test here, because frankly the best place for children is in a safe environment, preferably with family relations, whatever it is. What I am remain concerned about is about SEND, and I note on paragraph 16 it sort of indicates that that's still work in progress. You know, I could point to cases where actually somebody's been waiting 26 weeks for some intervention to be able to get back into schooling. And the level of EHCP plans coming out have, you know, consistently been going down, and at no more than 30% from memory last time I saw the figures. Can you give us some flavour as to what's happening in those two areas, and whether the work that you've been doing and is outlined in this report will have some benefits in those two specific areas, please?
Do you want to take that question now?
So my colleague Tim Moss, who is the AD for Education, he oversees this, but I do have some oversight and I'll try my best to assist. So in terms of recruitment to these posts, majority of these posts have been recruited to, but again, waiting for people to come into post and start to make that real difference. The outcomes for SEND are being closely monitored via the APP, and what I can see, we are progressing. There are certain capacity issues and capability issues, and in terms of achieving consistency across districts, that's also a certain level of challenge. I know that there is increased challenge in Cannock and Stafford as compared to other districts. So we are keeping an eye on local issues, trying to problem solve as best as is possible, given the resources that we have. There are some good positive news in terms of phase transfers that I'm sure everybody is aware of, that we have achieved 100% under 16, and we are working towards a good outcome for over 16 phase transfers as well. But in terms of the issues that you have raised, in terms of timeliness of EHCs, they continue to remain a challenge. We are working through it, but it's work in progress.
Mr. Sutton?
I mean, Councillor Pert, it's clear that the requests that we get for educational health and care plans continues year on year to go up, and it was again clear that the staff that we had, we had insufficient staff to be able to simply keep on top of it, and that's why Jonathan Price was very keen that we had an increase in the amount of key workers that were able to deal with that. And as has been mentioned, although in areas we are behind in getting them done timeliness, there has been a concentration on some of those key areas, the transition from one stage of school to another, where clearly that it's all important, but clearly that's probably more important than once a child is settled in a particular school for a number of years. I think one of the keys to this is in perhaps another piece of work as well, and that's the work that the Early Years Forum does with children in early years, who try and identify special education needs there, so that interventions can be put in place that end up that we do not, and parents do not require and request an educational health and care plan, because the work is being done with that with that young person without the need to go to a formal educational health and care plan, and the work that's involved in that, doing that when some of the interventions can be put in place. And I think that's work that's key in that area.
Councillor Davis, did you indicate?
Thank you, Chairman. My question really was about recruitment. I wondered what opportunities have our existing staff had to advance their careers, and even if they fell just slightly short, with additional training they could move up the ladder.
Yes, so we have a very strong apprenticeship offer within Staffordshire, and plus we are also investing in our Grow Our Own policy. So staff are supported, assured and promoted to apply to progress their careers. What I can report and quite pleased to report, is we have looked at the social work progression offer right from an apprenticeship stage through to head of service and beyond. And what we are starting to look at how we could bring those similar progression process and strategies in place for staff who are differentially qualified. So at this point in time, we do know that any staff who wishes to follow the social work career pathway can easily do that with support, but it is looking at others, for example, say SENKI workers, EPs, and other staff. So yes.
Councillor Yates.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to comment, I mean, early intervention and working with parents is extremely important to prevent children going into care in the first place. And, you know, it's one thing to support children in care and get them back to the parents, but don't have the situation arrive in the first place. And certainly in Biddulph, if it's happening in Biddulph, I'm sure it's happening elsewhere. We're having a bit of a reorganisation of our children's centre, and as a consequence, we're losing some of the breakfast clubs, which affect babies and toddlers in early years. And I know a lot of those provisions are volunteer-led, and we're coming on to volunteer policies later, but it's to do with how the centre's managed as well. And I think in some respects, that's the kind of thing which we need to prevent happening. And what is the strategy going forward to, instead of reducing those services or letting those services drift away through want of volunteers, we're actually maintaining them so that we are helping, you know, difficult parenting situations, to make sure that the intervention's in the right place, to make sure the nutrition's in the right place, to make sure the guidance is in the right place, so that we don't have these care numbers going up because we've missed something very early. That is a concern which we've got in our town. And I'm sure if we've got it, other people have got the same as well. And that's my key sort of invention for today.
Councillor Sutton.
I mean, there is no doubt that, and it has been enhanced since COVID, that early development across the board is the level that young children are achieving is less than it was pre-COVID. There's absolutely, the evidence is there absolutely across the board. So you are absolutely right. So as we move forward with family hubs, and Nisha's colleague Natasha leads on family hubs that will replace the children's centres as such, will morph into each other. A full detailed plan on how family hubs will operate and how that whole part ties up with the family intervention boards that are in each of the districts, and how that all links together and what we can do with that. And a lot, and some of the staff within children's centres have gone from being have come back in house now. So there will be very shortly a whole detailed plan on how that will go forward and operate. And, you know, and member involvement in that I see as key, both from a strategic point of view, but also from locality in a district, to be able to help to push and enhance that going forward. So there is opportunities for local members to be involved in that, and that also links up with volunteering, as you've identified, in children's centres. And quite a lot of the activities there are led by people who were actually themselves, you know, came to the children's centres for help and guidance, and eventually have moved on actually to being in the position where they are able to give some of that advice and run groups as well. So that's all, you know, excellent stuff. But we need going forward to look, I think, generally on parenting skills and being able to enhance those, and through the family hubs. I think that's a key thing that we can do.
Councillor Francis.
Well, Mark, I've just been absolutely astonished. I can't believe what you've just said. Children's centres, as you know, I was involved in with you and the previous cabinet member before you when we rationalised the children's centres across the county. And we toured all the children's centres, decided which we could keep, which were redundant, and the ones that, as you quite rightly say now, act as a hub. I've been asking now, I've been on the Children's Centre board in Stafford for nearly 20 years off and on when I was in Stafford Borough Council as well. In the last 4 years, because of COVID mostly, that caused a downturn because they weren't open, obviously. So I've not been to a board meeting in 4 years. I've asked questions in the last 18 months and Natasha's not come back to me. I think Sarah did one. She sent me an email or tried to call me or something. About the board meetings at the children's centres. I know who's running the children's centre now down at Siltmore. But nobody has contacted me or got hold of me or has asked a meeting with me in the county or down at the children's centre so that I know what's going on and where we are with it. And I'm just astonished that nobody's contacted me as a member and a board member of that children's centre. So I don't know where you've got the idea that members are involved, because I'm certainly not anymore.
So if I can just clarify, there is no board to run children's centres. It's a family improvement board that has partners come together. There are staff involved in that from the children's centre. There's health visitors. There's other partners who come together, and each one of those boards has got a local member on them. Yes, I think during COVID they didn't meet as often as perhaps they've done before, but I'm certainly not aware of family improvement boards not meeting at all. So I'll certainly take that point up. But I just wanted to clarify, they're not there to run the children's centres. They're there to look at all the analysis and statistics of how children are doing across the whole of the district, from and it looks at healthy weight or otherwise, child and other children's statistics about how well they're doing, good level of development and other things, so that those partners can set targets and hold each other to account within that district. It's not there to manage the children's centre.
You're right. You're spot on. I know exactly what you're saying, and I'm not having to go at you in specific terms. What I'm having a go at is that I've not been informed on what's been going on. That's one of the things. Now, and I've said it before and say it again, if officers are running this county council, let's tell the truth. Are they not? Now, if members are not involved because officers don't want them to be involved, that's fair comment, but that's not the way things should happen. As far as I'm concerned, the member involvement in those children's centres, as it was, or as you're saying it's going to be a hub, is paramount, because there's experience there and there's guidance there that certain members of these children's centres need from members of this county council. So it needs to be involved. They need to be involved in all the aspects of what's going on down that children's centre, irrelevant of whether they think they should be or not.
Come back.
Yeah, only very briefly, and I just wondered if there's any other members around the table who've been to family improvement boards over the last few years at all.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I think actually you're sitting there, Mike, he chairs ours, and I sit on there. We haven't had one for a while. We did have Teams meetings while we were going through the COVID, because I attended them on the Teams meetings, as Mike did as well, because Mike chaired it. Am I correct, Mike? Yes. So we have had them. We haven't had one for a time. The last one, I think, was cancelled for some reason. I don't know why. And we haven't had one this year as yet, as we speak. So maybe that's to look forward to, just to clarify. Thank you.
Mr. Spencer, you'd indicated.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. I have also been to one, but it was a couple of years ago, and I think COVID has interfered with them. Just two questions, if I could. Firstly, I find the report quite encouraging and reassuring, because we have to bear in mind this is an immense amount of additional money that's being put into the service, and we do need to see and have some reassurance about what that money is giving us. You may recall the last meeting, a lot of the debate was about this sort of lack of definitive statistics and information that members were constantly asking for. I suppose, and I accept this is very early on, so that is probably not available yet. The thing that concerns me, though, is that the report, there's quite a lot of what's probably best described as anecdotal evidence, isn't there, of people feeling better. And I am particularly concerned when we use what seems to be to me a bit of a fashionable statement, this one about lived experience, and we've seen an improvement in lived experience. Surely that's the whole point of social work, isn't it, is that we want to show and demonstrate an improvement in the lived experience of some of the most vulnerable people in our society. So I'm not sure that that is the right measure, if I'm honest. In the report, it describes the impact. I think the word it uses is immense. My argument would be, if it is immense, why isn't there some definitive stats around what that looks like to give us some more encouragement about the fact that the money is being spent in the right way. The secondary question as well really is to do with filling the available spaces and the difficulty that we've had historically in doing that. You're probably aware, I read with some interest recently about the government report that was published in November of last year, where the government is concerned that a lot of local authorities are employing, in particular, senior social workers that don't live in the area, in fact live some considerable distance away. It identified there were senior social workers in the home counties that live in Scotland, and it also pointed out, and I think I'm right in saying almost the entire senior team in Gloucester live on the Isle of Wight. And there was some understandable concern about that, because then all meetings with vulnerable people are carried out over Teams. Interestingly, the local authorities argue very clearly that that works, and that's the only way that we can move forward with what we're doing. I understand there is a consultation process out at the moment, and perhaps the good news on that, as I understand it, the intention is to make that more difficult in future, with the hope that that will then release some social workers and various other people from these agency teams that seem to be popping up everywhere, and therefore make them more available to local authorities. So I suppose my second question really is, where are we in that particular issue? Are we having to go some distance to employ these people? And actually, if the result of this consultation means that the amount of agency staff, whether it be singles or teams that we use, is that likely to have a significant impact on us as we move forward? Thank you.
Sutton?
So if I can speak to the first question to start with and do them in order. And I actually completely take your point, Bob, around the having some statistics around some of these measures. I think what we have to remember to start with, though, of course, is that this 5.7 is from this financial year. So I think what I was very clear on was that we would do as much of the preparatory work as we possibly could, you know, around those job descriptions and getting the adverts out and doing all that before the start of the financial year, so that we could start it as soon as the financial year started. And I am quite pleased that we've done an awful lot of that work, and think we are, you know, we're less than a month into the financial year, and we have got the majority of those places already either filled with person, or those people have been appointed, and we're waiting for them to leave their current role. So when it comes to sort of measures, I suppose this is about recruitment and retention. So we need to have some statistics around how we've been able to recruit them, which I think there's a bit in there, although it's not in figure term, but then retention, the impact this has had on our retention. And one of the big drivers for this work was so that social workers and other members of staff didn't feel that there wasn't, they couldn't cope because there was too much workload, there wasn't enough staff, so they would leave, making the situation even worse. So it's whether we've been able to address that going forward, and whether the added capacity that we have then has an impact on the actual work that's going on, and whether we do see a reduction in workloads, cases held, and then a reduction in turnaround times, the amount of children that we have in care and the like. So those are the two things. And going forward, I personally be wanting to make sure that we have those figures so we can understand from that perspective. The second point, and whether we've recruited social workers from outside the area, and that I'm not privy to where each individual social worker lives. I don't know whether Nisha might be able to answer that generally. But what I would say is certainly when I was visiting teams during the back end of COVID, workers and social workers and other staff were saying to me, we've never worked from home. Yeah, we might not come into the office as such, but we're still visiting children and families all over the place. So I find it difficult to understand how you could do that if you lived on the if you lived on the Isle of Wight and you were working in Tamworth, for argument's sake. But perhaps if I can hand over to Nisha, she might be able to answer that second point a bit better than me.
You're not far, Mark, because yes, our expectations around practice are very clear. Every statutory visit has to be done face-to-face, and there has to be written evidence of what was the plan for that visit, what was achieved, and what are the actions for the next statutory visit. There are visits which are held in between those statutory visits, so majority of the statutory visits are between 2 weeks to 6 weeks' time, so they will definitely be seen in person based on the amount of risk with that child. The in-between visits could be virtual, but that is in line with the child's need and expectations. So sometimes it's better to connect with our older young people virtually because you can get hold of them and they connect very well with you. Whereas for the youngsters, if there is a piece of work, it will be done face-to-face. So that's the reassurance. We do have agency staff because the MOU that guides the recruitment of those agency staff at this point in time tells us that we cannot recruit anyone who leaves their job within the West Midlands area from a permanent position as an agency. So if we have to recruit, it is always outside of the West Midlands area. So there are staff who are recruited, but they wouldn't be from Isle of Wight or Scotland. I don't know of anyone who lives that far. But the expectations are very clear. Team meetings are face-to-face, supervisions are face-to-face, and children and families visiting are face-to-face. Apart from that, we work flexibly, and that's a part of our flexible working policy within Staffordshire, which we encourage.
That helps from a safeguarding point of view, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Councillor Spencer?
Yes, Chair. Can I just say, having read that report, and it did talk about a large number of local authorities and how they work, I find those answers incredibly reassuring, that we do seem to be prioritising those face-to-face. Strange enough, the report says best practice is face-to-face, which seems very, very obvious, and I find it hugely encouraging that.
Okay. No other indications. I want to make the same comment that Councillor Spencer made, but slightly differently. And I'm going to be pedantic now and read from the report what the objective of this paper is, and that's on page 32, paragraph 6. This paper is presented to provide transparency and oversight over the budget spend and its impact in overall performance. So I think, as Councillor Spencer's already said, the report's all about 5.7 million being invested, and you can read through the report as you've described, qualitative and quantitative anecdotal information saying key roles have been filled, staff feel better valued, there's job leaver reduction as soon as the announcement was made, children in care numbers down. All of that sounds like a good news story. But back to being pedantic about item 6, this paper is presented to provide transparency and oversight over this budget spend, and I don't see how we can equate that to 5.7 million. You know, should it have been 3.7 million? Should it have been 12.7 million? The anecdotal information doesn't give us that confidence. So that's a comment, and I appreciate how you've answered Councillor Spencer to say there's some of the stats are not available yet. But I do think if we're doing our job as corporate review, we can't say what this paper is supposed to be asking us to say, is that 5.7 million committed the right way? So I'd like to see a bit more, perhaps if we had another report about what the sort of things are that are structurally have changed, which bits have worked, which ones that haven't. And I know this is another committee's remit rather than ours, but if we're to sign off the 5.7 million investment, there's nothing here saying how much of that 5.7 million is still to be spent, for instance. You know, I just think there's a bit missing from our point of view.
I completely appreciate the point that has been made, but it's just reiterating that the financial investment was agreed mid-Feb, and this report was written on the 4th of April. So it has to go through that process. So I completely take the point, and I have put in some data in there, but when this report comes back to scrutiny by Q3 or maybe Q4, I'm not sure, whatever is agreed here, then I will try and bring that data to yourself, because Mark will be having oversight of that data anyways. So we can share some of the data in this report.
Sutton and Nisha. And we'll move on to volunteering, which is item 6. I think, Councillor Sutton, you're staying for that?
Yeah, this is where I pretend to be my colleague who's got an appointment with the King today, so and she can't be here. It absolutely is. So I'm joined for this item by Catherine Mann, and you'll have to forgive me that it's not my absolute forte, although I have got my own anecdotal evidence to offer to this, as I am an active volunteer in a library. So today we'll be sharing with the committee 9 volunteering principles, subject to your comments and feedback, that Councillor Wilson will be recommended to Cabinet next month. These principles have been developed to ensure that we are doing everything we can as an organisation to support people that give up their time to volunteer for the County Council. Volunteers play a crucial role in helping us to support our residents and our communities, from maintaining our highways and green spaces to supporting families to our local libraries. It is also important to recognise that people who volunteer can also benefit from the experience in terms of their own health and well-being, which is supported by research undertaken by the National Council of Volunteering Organisations and their Time Well Spent survey. Volunteering can help to reduce social isolation, improve mental well-being, and furthermore, as many volunteers undertake activities within their community, can help them to feel part of their own community. Before I volunteered at our local library, I thought volunteering was all about doing something for the community, which it absolutely is. I didn't appreciate what volunteers actually get out of it themselves and improvements. And if I quote our own local library, we've had at least half a dozen people who've gone on from volunteering at the library to get full-time jobs. One of them within the library service and one connected to the library service, others in community on community help desks, working for local authorities. So all very, very, very positive. And the volunteers there tell me, that out of it they've met other people, like-minded people, met people in the community. They've gone on to be involved in other volunteering activities, as well as the satisfaction they get out of it from providing something for their community. I think that's probably... Free cups of tea, and that we offer those. You're more than welcome to come any day of the week, John, and have a free cup of tea in Brood Library. But I think I've just given a sort of sounding about what this is about and the principles, and I think it's probably better if I hand over to Catherine, who can give some more, details of the report specifically.
Thank you. As Councillor Sutton has already said, volunteers play an absolutely crucial role in supporting our communities, so we want to ensure that everyone who volunteers for the County Council has a really positive and a rewarding experience. An experience that contributes to their well-being, an opportunity to learn new skills, and really importantly, that chance to feel connected within their own community. Ensuring our residents live in thriving and sustainable communities is one of the 3 priority outcomes of our strategic plan. People who volunteer for Staffordshire County Council play a crucial role in helping us to achieve these outcomes. The Council's Communities Position Statement 2023 sets out some of the really great things that we've achieved with our communities and our partners over the last 18 months. Much of which would not have been possible without the efforts of our volunteers. So the documents that we're sharing with you today have been developed following feedback from volunteers and partners received during the COVID-19 response and the lessons learnt. As described in paragraphs 4 and 8 of the report, reviewing how we support our volunteers is an action within the community's delivery plan. The County Council's Communities Leadership Group have led this review, establishing a task and finish group which has included our VCSE partners, managers who work directly with volunteers, and people services colleagues. Between us, we have drafted a principles and guidance document for County Council staff and managers who support or manage volunteers. This is Appendix 1, so page 43 to 56 in your pack. A guide for volunteers, Appendix 2, which is 57 to 66 in your pack. A DBS checklist, which is at Appendix 3. A volunteer induction template, Appendix 4. And a volunteer agreement template, which is Appendix 5. As we drafted this documentation, we sought the views of our VCSE partners, and critically, we asked the views of our current volunteers, where 98% of the people we asked accepted and supported the proposed principles. The principles we have developed are at paragraph 12 of the report and are embedded within the guidance for staff and the guide for volunteers. The guidance and principles document for the County Council staff also covers planning and recruitment with role descriptions and training, pre-placement with initial contact and also the opportunity for alternative placements, and the placement stage, which covers induction, supervision and management. The guide for the volunteers covers what people can expect at each stage of their volunteer experience and includes additional useful information on claiming benefits and how to access the County Council's Lifestyle Benefits Portal, VivUp. As Councillor Sutton has said, we welcome your comments on the draft principles and guidance. Your feedback will inform our recommendation to Cabinet in June prior to embedding an approach which aims to provide the very best experience for everyone who volunteers for the County Council.
Councillor Francis, did you want to speak?
Yeah, just a quick one. Do we involve other organisations like the Scouts, the Sea Scouts, the Boys Brigade, any of those types of organisations in helping us with volunteering and actually giving us some periods of time from them to clear up problems or help in the community at all?
We don't work with them directly across the whole organisation, but different parts of the organisation do work with the Scouts, for example. But we've not, the key partners that we work with are Support Staffordshire, and also we work with Skivvies.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is we've got big organisations that are 100 years old, some of them, that actually want to help in the community and do help in the community, why don't we engage with them to help us as well? That's what I'm getting at.
Thanks. I'll follow that up.
Spencer next.
Chair, thank you, and thank you for the report. I think it's an excellent report, if I'm honest, and I also think long overdue for those of us, and I'm sure I speak for most people here, when we try to encourage volunteering. There are, for me, three big tripwires to people getting involved. DBS, do I have insurance, and who's doing the risk assessment? And it's sad to see that many initiatives fall at those. Frustratingly, sometimes they fall at one of those three or all three of them because someone has had a go at making up the strategy or making up what they think it means. And it was really encouraging to see in this document that those three things are actually tackled. And I do think that that is the obstacle to a lot of people, from my humble experience, in getting involved in volunteering. And I think the help and support that the document offers, and the fact that it tackles these three things and provides clarity for them, is to be welcomed. And I also think that we should hopefully see a significant increase in the number of people who want to get involved, mainly because it will give them that confidence and reassurance that they're doing it in a safe environment and the right way, and that actually they're being supported in doing it, rather than having obstacles put in front of them. So thank you very much for that.
Can I take another member comment? Councillor Yates.
Yes, I welcome these 9 principles, and I've got no objection to anything which is there. Just one thing, and really picking up on Councillor Spencer's comment. Where does ad hoc volunteering come in? I mean, there's plenty of opportunities. Social media nowadays is a fantastic, can be used as a fantastic clarion call to say, if there's a particular issue with a park, you know, say there's been, you know, heavy rain or flash flood and there's detritus everywhere, and you want to sort of organise a quick clean-up, so, you know, putting out on a Facebook post within a friends group, within a photographic group or something like that, to say, Wednesday morning, we're going to go down to XYZ. We want to have a clean-up. Anybody who comes down, stout footwear, bring gloves and a shovel, and we'll have a good tidy-up. I mean, where does that fit in with there? Where does that fit in with, you know, signing people up to make sure they're covered with public liability insurance? Where does that fit in with doing a ad hoc risk assessment? Is there a generic risk assessment which covers that kind of activity? But, you know, a lot of this is structured. I've looked at the website. It's based on, you know, there's no specified time period or constraint, but we're looking for people who regularly volunteer once a week, and I can understand that at the Children's Centre. I can understand that at the library, but I'm looking at the more environmental ad hoc opportunities.
Do you want to take that comment?
That's a really good point and really helpful, thank you. So one of the things that we've looked at doing is enhancing the intranet and the external web pages. So one of the things that we could perhaps consider is how we promote some of those ad hoc opportunities, but to ensure that we're doing that properly, we need to make sure that we've got the right documentation that sits behind that then supports communities so that they feel, picking up on Councillor Spencer's point, that they're doing something safely. So I'll follow that up and we'll have a look at what we can do to accommodate that. Thank you.
I'll take Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Chairman. I've no problem with the 9 things on there. What we don't need to do, though, is to make it too complicated for volunteers. They are volunteers at the end of the day, and too much bureaucracy puts people off doing and volunteering. What I would like to ask, though, is there's a lot of, I don't know whether this comes into this play on this particular item, but the community groups that are out there. I have asked the question at district level, but I've not yet received an answer. When they form a community group, a group of people within a community, do they have to adhere to guidance and what's the word I want? particularly if they're getting money off people within the community for a specific purpose. Do they have audited accounts? Do they have those kind of things? Maybe you can answer me that here, please.
I'm not certain of the answer, but I'll check with Support Staffordshire, because Support Staffordshire can provide that advice to individual organisations, and I believe also the Community Foundation, but I will speak to Gary Jones at Support Staffordshire and come back to you with an answer.
Can I come back, Chairman, on that? Thank you for that. I appreciate that, because sometimes the community groups out there have a certain conflict with maybe a parish council. They do the same they do the same thing, if you know where I'm coming from, and there's no comeback maybe for them, whereas there is for a parish council. They have to abide by the laws and the regulations of audit and everything else. And I do have some concerns, because there are a few of these community groups that do spring up, and we don't really know who they are accountable to. That's the word I want. So I just thought I'd ask the question while I'm here. So please, if you could come back to me, I'd appreciate it. But in relation to this, other than what I said in the first place, I've no problem with it, so long as we don't make it too bureaucratic for the volunteers out there, because they do volunteer, and it's at their own ad hoc when they can afford the time to volunteer. Thank you. If you'll excuse me,
Okay, we'll take Councillor Peters next.
Thank you, Chair. Just building on what my colleague has just said, if you lay that on top of the points that Councillor Spencer made about things that stood in people's way, there is a big obstacle if we don't get a grip of how we're going to launch this in terms of DBS, risk assessments, public liability, plus bureaucracy as well. And I know many people who want to be a volunteer but just say, oh, I just can't be bothered to do that. And we want to avoid that, because this is a genuine piece of work, of course. In Burton-on-Trent, where I originate from, we have a very diverse community. And I just wondered whether your paper will enable those who don't have English as their first language to become volunteers. They'll obviously be working on their skills to be able to speak English, but I just wondered how that would be managed to address diverse communities and provide opportunities to people who may not speak English as their first language. Thank you.
Did you want to take that comment?
When we were developing the guidance, we worked really closely with a colleague that's helped to lead the community's champions model. And one of the things that we need to continue when we've got this volunteer guidance approved to embed it is really work with local communities to make people absolutely aware of what is available, and also ensure that if there is a need to put things in different languages, that's addressed as part of that. But fundamental, I think, is working with the community champions, and I know there's a really good example of that within the Burton community.
Councillor Spencer?
Yes, Chair, thank you again. I think just an idea as we launch this, and maybe picking up on the points, the last 3 points that have just been made, there, that we ought to perhaps launch it by means of a strategy of building social capital, rather than just getting people to volunteer. By doing it in that respect, I'm sure people would want to generally, and in a general way, do that, but you are building that social capital. You are allowing people to say that they want to get involved. You can then take time to do the training and the risk assessment, the DBS, and all of those things, and actually build that capital that when we have the problem in the park, when we have some of those other issues, then you can offer volunteering opportunities to people rather than expect them to already know and put themselves forward. And I do think this process might not succeed unless we have that process of, I call it building social capital, but getting people to want to do it, because sometimes people don't always know quite what they want to get involved. They know they want to volunteer, but they're not quite sure what that is. And I think if it was launched in that way of building some sort of, I sound like a scratch record now, building that social capital, I think that would ease it through much better. Thank you.
Okay. I'll just make one comment, and that's to say what I like about it. I like the 9 principles. I think they're very good. I think there's a structure to it, and despite what Kath Parry said, I think there is a danger that you could overload people, but it's there, it's a Bible to work from, so I think that is good that it's all there. I think it's been said about the benefits guidance is good, the insurance guidance is good. The only thing I would say, and I can't read it anywhere, is there an opportunity to make sure that we're capturing all the potential volunteers? And I'll give you the example. Let's say that there's somebody working in an early years unit and a grandfather's dropping off and said, oh, let me know if you've got any gardening to do because I'm a retired gardener. And the person working in the early years unit says, well, there's no garden here. And little does that person know, but there's a major project that the county's taking on where they're doing a biodiversity study somewhere else in the county, and that opportunity's gone. And the same thing might apply, somebody talking on the contact centre or wherever they might be. Those touch points are the place where we're going to capture the volunteers. So how do we capture those potential nuggets of volunteers that might not be directly of interest to the individual that they're speaking to, but it might be of interest elsewhere?
That's a really helpful point, thank you. One of the things that we have discussed is where we have got volunteer managers, so if somebody approaches a service area for a volunteer opportunity but it's felt that it's not suitable, that we link them into another part of the organisation for volunteering. So we considered that. We've got a network of volunteer managers that meet informally, that share opportunities in terms of what volunteering there is. What that doesn't pick up, though, is where somebody comes into a different part of the service that doesn't have volunteering opportunities. How do we capture that? And I think one of the things that we'll have to look at is how we can publicise internally what the volunteering opportunities are, how we can put information out on the Knot, for example, to raise awareness, so that if people then are having conversations because they're the front door to the county council, how we can capture those and how we can then refilter them back into the right part of the organisation. So we'll have a look at that. Thank you.
Internal publicity is the secret, to make sure that we're capturing everything. Any other comments on that item? Councillor Thompson.
Have you noticed that the volunteers have dropped off? Yes. Because I think since COVID, everybody sort of wore themselves out, didn't they? And they've all sort of dropped.
Yeah, we've noticed a significant drop-off post-COVID. So the overall number of library volunteers, for example, pre-COVID was over 1,000. There is significantly less now. So one of the real focuses is on how we recruit new volunteers. And part of the COVID issue was that people's circumstances were changed. People hadn't volunteered for a significant period of time, then had got other things to do. They were that bit older. So it's how we encourage volunteering within all parts of communities so that we've got younger volunteers that are developing their skills. And part of this piece of work is to really ensure that all of our volunteers are having a really good experience, and it does give those opportunities, as Councillor Sutton referenced earlier, so that volunteering is also an opportunity to step onto either further employment or to further education, so that it brings a real benefit. But yes, volunteering has dropped off, and it is a real focus going forward.
So certainly from my own experience at the library where I volunteer, yeah, there certainly has been a drop-off on the amount of volunteers that we had. And I think it's symptomatic with what we found generally in workforce across the country as well, that COVID gave people an opportunity to reevaluate things that they were actually doing, as well as the fact that quite a lot of the library volunteers were of an age where when we were reintroducing volunteering, they still didn't feel capable of coming back from a safety perspective, not wanting to mix with other people, and then they just haven't come back at all. But on a positive note, I would certainly say from Alan, we have sufficient volunteers, and we've had half a dozen new ones come forward, and we've had volunteers as well come forward that don't necessarily want to do the usual behind the counter issuing books, but want to be involved in other ways as well. So yeah, you know, and I think it is starting to reverse that trend that we had after COVID a little bit.
And Councillor Pert?
I wasn't going to speak on this issue. Thank you, Chair. But that last question just sort of seemed to touch on a deep vein. And I have to say that having been to your library, or the library in Brood, it's a first-class library, as well as Eccleshall being a first-class library. And I pay tribute to the work of those volunteers there. But just picking up that last point, you know, it does strike me that one of the things that was really noticeable was there was a whole rook of really good senior people who decided to take early retirement. And maybe there's, you know, some very specific streams of engagement that we could try and do to pick off some of those people, because, you know, having retired early, if they have sufficient flexibility, you'd hope that they would be in a position to want to get some fulfilment, because it is a very fulfilling role, and maybe there is some very specific sort of strands of people you might want to try and target to get them specifically in, because if you could open up that strand of people, and I think it was 3% of the workforce, it was a significant number who've decided to retire early. If you could try and target those and bring them in, you know, it could be a very useful new pool of activity. Having said that, I wasn't going to talk. There was one thing that struck me within the volunteers pack, the guide for volunteers, and that I liked all of it that was there. And I specifically like the sort of, you know, the very clear schematic in terms of, you know, this is what you will expect at every step of the way. And I thought that was really good. And I just questioned in my mind whether the only thing that might have been missing, is putting in a block that looked very specifically at how you ensured that the benefits of the volunteering for the volunteer were maximised. Because if you don't have that very specific conversation, you know, in terms of what are you looking to get out from this, to make sure that as a supervisor or a colleague that you allow people to do that, because that's the bit which keeps people volunteering. You know, there will be really bad days volunteering, but the bit that keeps you doing it is that actually there's something here that I am getting out from it. And if you know what that is, that really is very helpful for keeping people, you know, within all volunteer roles. Thank you, Chair.
Any response to that?
That is something that we can look at, Councillor Pert. Obviously, volunteering, different people are motivated to do different things, so we just need to make sure that what we do include in this isn't something that then becomes so generic it then becomes meaningless. But it is something that we can have a look at, and with reference to sort of former colleagues that have retired, I am aware that they're volunteering within their local communities, so it might be something that we could perhaps incorporate into exit interviews in terms of signposting people back to potential volunteering opportunities within the County Council.
Pert again?
Yes, sorry, I wasn't just thinking about our colleagues. I was thinking about many other organisations, particularly public sector organisations, having sat on boards of many organisations across education, health and housing. You know, it's not a phenomenon we've just seen in the County Council. It's a phenomenon we've seen across just about every organisation, public sector, private sector. And if you could tap into some of that, that might be another, a stream of volunteers, notwithstanding what was said earlier in response to Councillor Thompson. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no other comments on that, we'll move to item 7, and thank you for your participation on that item. Item 7 is the work programme, and we do have a timetable date of the 20th of June, and there's a fairly full agenda already for that. We've got the annual report, we've got the ONS work programmes, climate change working group update. We need to appoint our MTFS for the next year, and we've got the Q4 integrated performance report. Beyond that, we're open to offers. Anybody wants to put anything forward for ideas? We'll have the usual quarterly reports of the integrated performance, and we'll have the usual updates from things like the working groups. Is there anything else that anybody wants to add at this stage to the future work programmes? No? Well, by all means, let myself or Mandy know, we can get them into the programme. And hopefully we'll see you again in the June meeting. I'll close the meeting.